Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to Ed Up on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business, recording live from Doha, Qatar, here at the WISE 2021 Education Conference. Pretty incredible folks I'm getting to meet, and I have one in front of me today. I say today, but right now, because I've met some others, and he came by, and I said, we got to get this guy on the podcast. We got to sit him down because he's doing amazing things in Africa. And let me introduce him, but I've got to get the standing ovation button ready because it just won't do it justice if I don't get it ready. Here it comes. Ladies and gentlemen, Gyimah Awuah. He's founder and president of Ashesi University. What's going on, Patrick? How are you?
I'm fine. It's good to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. We've been chasing you. You know, you're elusive, man. It means you're very busy.
I'm not trying to be elusive.
Well, you know what? You got a lot to do. So talk to me about Ashesi University. Where is it for everybody listening? And what do you do and how do you do it?
Ashesi University is based in Ghana, and it's 20 years old. What we're doing is trying to change the way education is done in higher ed on the continent. And we are centered on a mission of educating ethical entrepreneurial leaders. So in addition to what universities normally think of themselves as educating people, developing the intellect, doing research, that we also feel that, thinking intentionally about values and thinking about certain kinds of leadership that we want to nurture in our society is important. And so we have a curriculum and an entire approach that is built around getting students to ask the important questions about what kind of society we want to create and how to create it, and getting a core curriculum that is multidisciplinary. So they're learning to connect the dots between disciplines. They're learning to hold themselves accountable as future leaders and as citizens of our society. And they're also learning how to solve real problems in our society. So solving problems in community, solving problems for corporate Ghana and corporate Africa. That's what Ashesi is all about.
That's amazing. So tell me about, 20 years old, that's infancy for higher education in general. So you're the founder. So how does Ashesi University begin? Where's the idea come from? How do you make it happen? And how does that whole idea come together?
Right. So about infancy first, let me just say that 2 years ago, when Ashesi was 18, it was finally the same age as our freshman class when they entered.
Yeah, there you go.
Which was a milestone for us.
That's great. Congratulations.
But the idea came, I was working at Microsoft Corporation. Having grown up in Ghana and done my university education in the United States, I got recruited to Microsoft in Redmond in Washington State. And my son was born, and that caused me to sort of reevaluate my career and my life and my purpose, right? Because I suddenly was very concerned about the African continent and what it would mean for people of African descent.
Because your son is born, and you say to yourself, he needs to know where he's come from and where I've come from, and you decide that you're going to invest in social impact at that point.
Well, because my son is born, and I say to myself, there's another generation, there's multiple generations coming of people of African descent, and those generations, their future happiness, wherever it is they're in the world, will depend in large part on what's happening on the African continent. And so that's caused me to think, okay, we need to change the trajectory. And back when my son was born, it was shortly after crises in Rwanda and Somalia and other places. And so there was a lot of negative news coming out of the continent. And I felt, well, this is not good. It has to change. And those of us who've been given a lot of opportunities ought to be going back and helping to help with development. And so that's what caused me to want to go back and make a contribution.
I mean, that's pretty incredible. As an outsider looking in, so you're in the U.S. and Washington State,
right?
And you just decide your son's born, and you say, I'm going to move to Ghana. Right? You just moved to Ghana, just a straight shot? You just moved to Ghana?
Well, it took a little longer. Than my son is born, I started to worry about this stuff. I'm talking about it with my wife a lot. And one day I say to her, I ask her, what would you say if I said, I'm going to quit Microsoft today? Let's go to Ghana. Let's do education. And she immediately said yes.
Wow.
And then I said,
Amazing wife.
and she's like from Seattle, right? She grew up, she's an American. And then I said, wait, let's think about it.
You second guessed yourself, right?
Right.
You wanted to plan it out. Right?
Yeah, and it took me a year, a little more than a year after that conversation before I picked up the courage to leave the company.
So how do you start the university? What does that look like? You take your personal investments, you find investors. Is it the government of Ghana? How does that process look?
So that's a good question. The first thing I did was manage my fear, right? And because that's why I was hesitating. And managing my fear for me meant going to grad school. I went to do an MBA to sort of understand how organizations function, or different parts of it. And in grad school, I actually did a project where I had some of my colleagues come with me to Ghana. We did a feasibility study. We did all the business planning for this. So figuring out the financial plan for the university. I started to build a board. And when I completed grad school, I went back to Seattle, set up a foundation, donated to it, and asked some of my former colleagues at Microsoft to join me in donations, which some of them did. And so we started to raise money, and then went to Ghana. We're taking the research that we got during the feasibility study to guide the work of an advisory board here of 25 academics to help us with curriculum development, which they graciously did for free. And then we went about the process of, taking the capital we had raised and renting facilities, buying equipment, hiring people, going through accreditation, recruiting students.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And so now you're 20.
Yes.
You're 20. Your university is 20 years old. How has the trajectory of a university changed over the last 20 years? I mean, it's probably bare bones in year one. What does year 20 look like and feel like right now at the university? And have you done what you've wanted to do, or is there still more to do?
Well, there's still more to do, but we've done all that I wanted us to have had done by now, right? So we started, as you said, bare bones. We rented a house in Accra, the capital city of Ghana. It was in a bad state. The roof was caving in, that sort of thing, and we repaired it and converted it to an academic space. We started with 30 students. In January, this next semester coming up, we'll be at 1,300 students. So there's been a steady trajectory, a linear growth for us over the 20 years. And we also have a very strong reputation in Ghana, in the world. We're highly ranked with the Times Higher Ed impact rankings for universities in Africa.
And you won an award here from WISE in 2017, right?
That's right. I won the WISE Prize in 2017, which was amazing.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's pretty awesome. I guess that communicates your impact, right? And so part of your mission is educating ethical entrepreneurial leaders in Africa. So talk about that. Why those words, ethical, entrepreneurial? Why those words specifically?
Right. So let me talk about entrepreneurial first, right? So if you look at the African continent, I would say that a lot of what needs to be built and a lot of what needs to be done is yet to be done. In the sense that there's a lot of development ahead of us to get the average citizen of an African country to be living at a comparable level as citizens elsewhere on the planet.
I can imagine there's probably a big gap there.
There is.
Exists, yeah.
So there's a lot that needs to be created. And so we need entrepreneuring minds everywhere. We need entrepreneuring minds in government. We need entrepreneuring minds in the private sector, in the social sector. And by that, I mean, we need people who can look at the status quo and question it, who can imagine new things that we can be doing to improve the status quo, who can implement those new things and persist through the difficulty of that implementation. So we need people with courage, and to have of this mindset of creating, right? Because a lot needs to be created on the continent. ethics, I think, is really fundamental. And the way I explain it actually is to say, look, let's do a thought exercise. Two societies. There's one society where everybody is dishonest, everybody, right? There's no honest people. And there's another society where everybody is honest. Now, in this thought experiment, the society where everybody is dishonest cannot get things done. They cannot get together to build a school, to build a hospital, to build a road. Everyone becomes sort of a, you know, sort of an atom in this society, totally disconnected because there's no trust. And if in a society where there's total trust because everybody's honest, they can get together and do a lot of things even without signing contracts, right? So clearly, societies need to be leaning towards um, honesty and ethical behavior. But we also decided on ethics as fundamental to what we do because I done this exercise with friends and family in Ghana where we would take different problems, and for each problem you ask why is this the way it is. And when you ask the question, you get a set of answers. You take each of those answers and ask why. We would always, if we did this exercise, we always ended up with leadership as a root cause of why a bad situation remained
Of
that
course.
way. And by leadership, we meant people in positions of influence, people in charge who were accepting the status quo. Some of them were corrupt, um, and so we felt, look, this is really fundamental to progress. That we need people who have this sort of integrity and this wholeness of purpose, and those people, especially in positions of leadership in a country like Ghana, are the ones who've had a post-secondary education. So if you're working in post-secondary education, you're quite literally educating the leaders of our society fast forward 20, 30 years when they're in their 40s and 30s.
Right.
So we need to make this very important thing central to what we do.
I moderated a panel earlier today on does higher education still have value? That was the title of it. Does higher
Right.
education still have value? And, obviously in the US, as I'm sure you're familiar, there is a big question on whether higher education still has value. You see companies like Microsoft, for example, say, you know what, you don't need a college degree, we'll hire you. And I always go, what do other countries really think? Is it, the student who goes, I don't know if I'm going to go to college or not. What a privilege it is to have that choice versus some other country that may not have the economic heft of the United States, where going to college, people would literally crawl over each other to get an opportunity to get to go to college. What's the perspective from Ghana and whether a higher education has value, or the African nations in general that you're familiar with?
So my perspective is that higher education has a tremendous amount of value, certainly in our context. But I think beyond our context, it is incredibly important. It's very easy when you have a very strong higher ed system to think it has no value. But the way to answer the question is to imagine all the universities just went away. What would happen?
Yeah.
Even the United States would struggle with that, right? So higher education has tremendous amount of value. I would argue actually that what we need in the future, because things are changing so rapidly, is that we need, beyond higher education, we need lifelong learning.
Right.
People are going to have to constantly be retooling. And so the higher education enterprise will have to adapt over time so that we're engaging professionals in the workplace as well. It's not just you finished high school, you come to college for 4 years, maybe an additional 2 years to get a master's, and you go get a job.
And
right?
then you're gone forever. We'll never see you again.
It's going to be, continued, micro credential courses, continuous retooling, and the nature of who teaches those courses may well change as well. It's not going to be only professors, academic professors doing that work. It's going to be people who are out in the world, who are working, or people who are practicing their trade and building a certain expertise and sharing it through these sort of micro credentialing opportunities to others throughout their lifetime.
I do want to just note because, you know, for most of our listeners, they're in the US. And so, when you talk rankings, you get US News World and Report. They're very fuzzy. We don't know what they mean. It's like they're almost made up at sometimes. But Ashesi was ranked among the world's top 400 most impactful universities in the 2021 Global Times Higher Education University Impact Rankings. The impact rankings measure actions taken by higher education institutions to realize United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's pretty incredible. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to your students?
Well, first of all, we're very proud and very grateful that we're recognized in this way. But I do think that the impact rankings are a really good example of the direction that rankings should take. So we should be thinking about what are the outcomes for students, what is the impact in society, and
having something like the United Nations be the guide that you're going to with those rankings, it makes a big difference on the value of the ranking, in my opinion.
Right. And I think that with the Sustainable Development Goals, this is something that there was a lot of consultation around the world, and the world agreed these are things that we want to achieve. So there's this broad general agreement about them. And so because of that, it serves as a good way to measure how well are we doing towards creating the world that we've said we want to see.
So what do we need to know about Ashesi University that I haven't talked about, or anything that you want to say that to our audience? First of all, congratulations. I mean, 20 years, startup university. It's not hard to, it's, I want to say it's not hard to start a university. It's impossible to do it, and do it in a way that's sustainable and impactful. And congratulations to you, and so much respect, sir, for what you've done. But what do you want to say about Ashesi? What's the future look like? What's next?
Thank you for the very kind words. I would say that for us, we very much want to be an institution without walls. We want to be a university without walls, in the sense that we want to be connected to the community that we're working in. We want to be connected to the world. We want to be connected with other universities. And so we are very open about sharing what we're doing with other universities, and we're very open about learning from other universities and our peers around the world. And I think that people ask me a lot about, well, shouldn't you only be focusing on your own context? And well, what is my context? Yeah, my context is Ghana. My context is Africa. My context is planet Earth. We can't forget that. So we do need to connect with others, and where we embrace learning from others and sharing what we have with others. And so my invitation for anybody hearing your podcast who thinks that what we're doing resonates with what they're doing, or who would like to share with us, please reach out.
So you're open to partnerships, and you're open to working with U.S. universities in new and innovative ways?
Absolutely. And we have been doing that from day one. I think that this combination of having a very high aspiration and ambition for what we want to help accomplish on the continent, and also having a lot of humility to learn from others, it's a combination that works for us.
What did you do? I think about these questions. I got to get one more in with you before you leave.
Sure.
Online learning, a pandemic, online learning. What did that do to you, and what did that do to Africa and the students in Africa, and what did that look like?
It's been an interesting couple of years. Unfortunately, a lot of universities and educational institutions were not able to operate online. We were, because we had already started to do some work with flipped classrooms and so on, and we'd built all these systems, but we'd never done online as 100% enterprise for undergraduates. And it was really interesting to see that work quite well. But it's also, let me just say, it's opened my perspective about what online education is going to mean in the future. I think that it's here to stay. I think that in fact, all universities or most universities should maintain some online content going into the future, because remember I talked about lifelong learning. Students are going to have to, when they become professionals, they're going to have to continue to learn. And so teaching them how to do that now as undergraduates is going to serve them very well in their professional lives as well. And so this is something that's going to continue. The second really wonderful surprise for us was, we've always had visiting faculty at our institution from our very first semester.
Mm-hmm.
But we've only ever had so many on campus at any one time. And this last year, we had far many more quote unquote visiting faculty teaching from the United States, because it was easier for them to teach an online class from, where it was Cambridge or New York City or wherever. They can make that time commitment of teaching, 3 hours a week for 4 months versus having to travel to Ghana. And so it sort of revealed to us that there's this connectivity that we can maintain moving forward. And our desire to be engaging with other universities in the world and our peers around the world has only been improved by online learning.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This gentleman I have in front of me is a global leader in education that you need to know. Patrick, how do we connect with you? Where do we find you? LinkedIn, email? Where do we connect with you if we want to connect?
Well, you can connect with us on our website, ashesi.edu.gh, ashesi.edu.gh. On all the social media platforms is at Ashesi, ASHESI. If you send something to at Ashesi and you mention my name, it'll come to me. You could also just connect with me at Patrick Awuah Jr., Patrick Awuah, and then JR on Twitter, LinkedIn, and all
so
the
you're
other
easy to
sites.
find, which means we're going to find you, my friend. We're going to find you wherever you are. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Look forward to it.
Patrick Awuah, he's founder and president of Ashesi University. You've just ed upped.